Today I'm going to talk about why 45% of seemingly good retirement plans fail. I'm Stephen Ely, longtime certified financial planner. My big focus is retirement planning, and what I want to share with you today is the findings of a retirement study that showed that 45% of retirement plans risk failure. We're going to go over the key findings of this study, and then we're going to discuss the 3 big reasons for this failure, and I'm even going to give you solutions that I use with my own clients. So let's get into the video. First, I want to go over the study here. So this comes from the Morningstar Center for Retirement and Policy Studies. And what they did was they used a simulation tool that looks at individual characteristics, healthcare costs, projected longevity, things like that. And they're trying to determine the sufficiency of people's retirement income. The upshot of the study is that the model predicts that 45% of American households are going to run short of money in retirement. And this varies based on demographics and other factors. In fact, the outlook is even worse for single women, for example, where they predict that 55% of them are at risk in retirement. And that compares to 41% of couples and 40% of single males. So why is it that such an alarming rate of retirement plans fail? Well, in my experience as an advisor, I've boiled it down to 3 main issues, and each of these is actually corroborated by the study. So we're going to jump into number 1, and that is an ill-conceived withdrawal strategy. A lot of people just go into retirement. They haven't done any sort of analysis on their withdrawal strategy. They kind of just pick an age. A lot of times that happens to be 65, and they're just like, boom, I'm going to retire at 65 and I'm going to start taking Social Security, and that's it. 2 big problems that you see that really impact retirement plans with this type of, kind of haphazard withdrawal strategy are, 1, most of these people, in fact, a study by JP Morgan showed that 80% of people that have retirement plans do this. They wait until they're forced to take required minimum distributions at age 72 and a half before they start withdrawing from their tax-deferred retirement accounts, like their 401ks and IRAs. This could be a really big problem, and I'm going to show you guys why. Second, most people tend to pick a fixed type withdrawal strategy where they just have, a fixed amount, let's just say $5,000 a month, and they withdraw the same amount every month from their accounts, regardless of what's happening with their portfolios. Now, first, let's get into this required minimum distribution mishap. A lot of retirement planners call it the tax-deferred trap. And so what's going on here is a lot of people think that delaying withdrawing from their tax-deferred accounts for as long as possible is the right move. And some people just think, hey, I don't need to take the money from that account. Why should I withdraw from it? And I get it. But there's a few problems with this. So the longer you wait to start withdrawing from these tax-deferred accounts, the more that account grows because of, compounding. That means your tax burden is also compounding at the same time, and your required minimum distributions are going to grow. A better strategy usually, not always, but usually is spread out your withdrawals earlier, and that way you reduce your future required minimum distributions and you reduce your tax burden as well. One thing that a lot of planners like myself do is they use Roth conversion strategies, and so once you retire, your income is dropped, you're in a lower tax bracket. We start converting your 401k or IRA into a Roth. You pay some taxes up front, but then you'll never pay taxes on that again. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to save money on taxes over time, and it's going to mean that your tax-adjusted wealth is higher. And the higher your wealth, the more purchasing power that gives you. So that's the first part of the withdrawal strategy to think through. Probably you don't want to just wait to take RMDs until the last minute. You need to evaluate that. And then you really do need to think through which account withdrawing from gives you the biggest bang for the buck. And so there really needs to be an overarching strategy for that. Now, the second problem that a lot of people have in their withdrawal strategies is that they just take a fixed amount every month. So For example, they might just take $5,000 every single month, no matter what is happening with their portfolio. This could be a really big problem because of something called sequence of return risk. We talk about it a lot around here, and I don't want to bore my regular viewers, but if you're new, basically sequence of return risk is the risk that you retire and you're taking a fixed amount from your portfolio, and all of a sudden you hit this bad string of returns, which has happened plenty of times throughout history. You hit these bad returns and the markets maybe don't recover quickly and you keep taking the same amount. And if that happens, there's a high likelihood that you run out of funds early because you've taken so much money, you just never were able to recover and you end up blowing through your funds in like 10 or 15 years. And like I said, this isn't just some theoretical concept. I mean, this is something that has happened to people plenty of times throughout history. Most recently was the people who retired around the year 2000, and then they got hit with a double whammy of first you had the tech bubble blow up, and then you had the great financial crisis. And so, I mean, I remember reading a lot of stories of people who, A, had to go back to work if they could even find it, or B, they had to live in kind of relative poverty. I mean, I remember reading a story about a guy that he had to get roommates and, sell all of the possessions that he had and so on. And so, you want to avoid that happening if at all possible. And so what we do, and what I think is probably, in the retirement literature, widely considered one of the best withdrawal strategies, is using something called retirement income guardrails. And what this means is it's a dynamic retirement income strategy where you adjust your withdrawals based on your portfolio's performance. And I'm not talking about doing anything crazy. You're not going from like $5,000 a month to like $1,000 and back and forth. Basically, you're going to set thresholds around certain levels. And what would happen is when times are good and your portfolio is grown, you'll actually start taking more. In exchange for that, when times are bad and your portfolio goes below a certain threshold, you're going to tighten your belt. And you might take, let's say, 10% less until your portfolio has recovered back above a certain level. And I mean, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of rules, but that's kind of the gist of it. So why is this better than maybe a fixed withdrawal strategy, something like the 4% rule? Well, number one, if you go back and look at how a strategy like this performed historically, this kind of strategy would get you through all of the worst periods in market history. And that includes the Great Depression, or actually the worst period for investors because inflation was so high was the 1970s. Whereas the 4% rule, you actually would have failed sometimes historically in periods like that. Number two, and I think this is important, is this kind of strategy actually allows you to have a higher safe withdrawal rate. In fact, you could have a safe withdrawal rate around something like 5.4%, which, could be thousands of extra dollars per year for somebody as compared to like the 4% rule. So I hope that makes sense. And now, before I move on, I just want to talk about how technical all of this can get. And I literally just ran a plan that considered 8 different combinations of taking Social Security at different ages for a husband and spouse, just to figure out kind of what was the optimal age for each of them to take it. And so contrast that with what we're talking about in this video and how 45% of people might fail. And the reality is most people just pick an age for retirement and they don't do any kind of real analysis on what's going to work best for their situation. And so I don't want to see people make that mistake. And if you want to make sure that you're on the right track, what we've done, we've created a questionnaire that you can fill out, and it's going to help you measure your chances of retirement success. So just fill it out, and I'll email you back a free custom video where I highlight your chances of retirement success, and I'll even highlight the factors that you might be overlooking. And so if you want to get started with that, just click the link in the description. Now, let's go to the second reason why 45% of these retirement plans are failing. And that is reason number 2, retiring and taking Social Security too early. Like I just mentioned, a lot of people have no sort of plan at all. They just get really burned out at work, which very understandable. And they decide to retire right when they're first eligible for Social Security at age 62. But let me tell you, for most people, This is probably a terrible idea. In fact, the study highlights the fact that 54% of people who do this are likely going to run out of funds early. Working just a few extra years can be the difference between a successful retirement and a failure, and often that might be the determining factor. You would be shocked at the difference it makes. And in fact, I'm going to show you guys a graphic from a real retirement plan here in just a second. But there are two reasons really why this makes such a big difference. One, each year that you wait to take Social Security, your check gets higher, right? So that's going to help you if you happen to live a really long life, you're going to have a higher check. Related to that, for couples, if you do actually have a different Social Security amount for each of you, the one that has a higher amount is going to give the surviving spouse with a lower amount a higher surviving spouse benefit if that person dies. And so you want to take advantage of that to the extent that's possible. Another reason why delaying work really makes such a big difference in your retirement outcome is that it allows your portfolio assets to grow even longer and compound. And so that's fewer years that you need to withdraw from your portfolio. And if you happen to be kind of a big spender, that's going to make a huge difference. And I'm going to show you guys right now. So this is a graphic from a real retirement plan that I used with a client. And on the right, it shows their probability of success, just baseline stuff. And on the left, it shows their probability of success if we change different variables. The only variable that I've changed for this is the retirement age for this person. So all I did was increase it by 3 years from 61 to 64. That's it, nothing else. And look at the massive difference on the left versus the right. Now, again, this is going to be different for everybody. There's a ton of stuff that would actually influence this. And it depends on where the assets are located and how much you're spending, what's the return on investment and so on. But just in general, it's a big deal, guys. Now, let's go on and look at the third reason why a lot of these retirement plans are failing, and that is poor savings and investing habits. Let me explain what I mean here, right? There's a couple of things going on. One, way too many people don't take advantage of their work retirement plans, even if they're offered. A lot of times, the reasons people give for this is because they think that their plans are risky because they're going to be invested in the stock market and they don't really know anything about investing and they're worried that they're going to lose all their money. And that's a really, really reasonable concern, and it kind of highlights the failings of our retirement system in the United States, that we force people to make these decisions in the first place. The second issue here is that even if you did have your money invested, a lot of people are just letting that money sit in cash. So this is from the Wall Street Journal, and they've taken information from a Vanguard study. And so what this study highlights is the fact that a lot of people, you switch jobs, they had a 401k, and what they do after they switch jobs is they take their 401k and they roll it into an IRA. And this can be totally fine in most cases. The problem is, once they roll that money to an IRA, it's just sitting there in cash, uninvested. And so what they found is that a third of these plans that were rolled over to IRAs were sitting in cash after 7 years. They'd done nothing. So imagine how much money these guys had missed out in gains. Do not let this happen to you. And so now we're going to talk about some solutions to this problem. So number one thing you want to do, get a savings plan in place. So in most circumstances, you're going to want to take advantage of your employer retirement plan, especially if it has a match. From there, you also need to decide where are you going to get your biggest bang for your buck. If you're a really high earner and you're in a really high tax bracket, probably you do want to do the pre-tax route where you save money on taxes. If you're having a down year or you're not as high as of an earner and there's a Roth option, maybe you do the Roth. Also, in addition to just the employer plan, you want to think through whether you want to save in something like a health savings account or just a regular taxable brokerage. And you need to kind of run a scenario analysis and figure out where you get the biggest bang for your buck for your savings. Once you do that, you have to auto-enroll. The good thing for employer plans is usually you can do that. But if you want to save outside of that, you're going to have to link your investment account to your checking account and make sure that you are automatically putting your savings and then automatically investing every single month or week or however often. The only reason I can really think of that you wouldn't want to set up, like, investing in your employer plan or some kind of auto savings plan, is if you have a lot of credit card debt or maybe even student loans. And I would generally tell people knock that stuff out first and then start doing the retirement savings. But in most cases, you're almost always going to be better off. Now, the third part of this is don't stay invested in cash. And so if you don't know how to invest, that's fine. They have things called target date funds. And what these are is they're kind of based on your age, and they go, when is an estimated retirement date for you? What year? And so it might be 2040, 2045, 2050. And they automatically invest for you, and they just change how risky those investments are the closer you get to that retirement age. A lot of advisors love to rip on target date funds. They're not my favorite thing in the world, but I gotta tell you, in most situations, they're almost certainly going to be better than sitting in cash, especially in the long term. And so while there might be better ways to invest than target date, cash is almost always the worst way. And I just want to throw out here a little disclaimer. Nothing I ever say on here should be taken as specific advice. You need to evaluate your own situation and talk to professionals, so on. And, in other words, we always say, don't sue me, please. But like I said, if you know nothing of investing, target dates are not the worst thing you could do. In fact, they're probably better than, a lot of other options, to be honest. So there you go. Hopefully now you'll be equipped to avoid some of these bigger mishaps and not end up in that 45% retirement failure bucket. As always, I cannot stress enough how different these solutions might be based on your own specific circumstances. And as I said earlier, we've created a questionnaire where you can input your info, and I will personally email you a complimentary video that lets you know your odds of retirement success and some of the pitfalls I see based on the information you've given me. All you got to do is just click the link below to get started. Thanks for watching.